course, Duquesne Corporation has repaired the generator for you, and of course this all needs to be reassembled. The weld head, nothing has been, fortunately there was nothing wrong with this, but one thing that I did was I did polish the tip of the horn. There was a small nick in here, and this may have been from the 20 years of age of use, or it could be just a small adjustment that I'll be showing you in just a moment. So the tip of the horn's been polished. So of course you're going to be receiving your generator, the weld head, the carriage, and the belt clamp. The first thing that you'll want to do is to take the carriage, and note that there are 2 bolt holes. This is for the belt clamp. There's also the wedge here, and there's also a wedge on the back side of the weld head. And when the 2 pieces are put together, these 2 wedges interlock more or less, and this is where we're able to adjust the gap. Rather critical component here. So the first thing that you'll want to do is take the carriage, again with the 2 bolt holes on the top, and simply to slide that on to the track. Now I have 2 sheets of polyester film here on the bed of the machine, because we do not want the tip of the horn, which has now been polished and very precise. It's almost a mirror finish there. You want to take the weld head, position it so that it runs between the 2 pairs of bearings there. And now on this particular machine, there's quite a gap down here. There's probably a good 1/8 of an inch. But on your machine, it's very possible that this head will rest very close to the anvil. And again, we don't want the tip of the horn to be making contact with the anvil, so the 2 sheets of polyester film are there simply as a cushion. There. The next thing to do, take the belt clamp, and it has been opened up so that it will slide over the belt at the back, and then put the 2 bolts in place. And these are 3/16, so take those and tighten those up. In your toolkit, you should have that wrench that's needed. Now, these bearings here that support the weld head, these bearings are just very slightly loose. There's no wiggle to the unit, and so right now all of the weight of the head is resting on that wedge on the back side. The next operation is rather crucial, because we want to make sure that there is a proper gap between the horn down here. The horn is the very extension of the whole unit that's inside of here. This here is the shroud. There's a larger shroud, but the actual component that makes contact with the film is called the horn. And it's critical that we have the right gap between the tip of the horn and the anvil. And on your machine, there is this small raised rod here, and that becomes the anvil. And so when the 2 pieces of polyester film are there, of course the horn is making contact with the film, and the anvil, the rod that's right behind that, is where the energy is, then the heat is created strictly at the point of contact. So again, we need to have the proper gap between the horn and the anvil. Now, if you take simply one sheet of film and have it between the horn and the anvil, you'll then be able to check for the gap by moving that film. You might move the carriage to another location and just check to see if it's loose. If there's a great deal of gap there, we want to make sure that the gap is set to approximately the thickness of a sheet of 3 mil polyester film. So as I mentioned earlier, there's that wedge back there, and that wedge is controlled by a set screw that comes in from either side. A set screw that comes in from either side of the weld head here on the carriage. And you have to realize that that wedge is held in place by both of these screws being tightened against that. So in order to move the wedge, you want to loosen up one side and then tighten up the other. So in this case, if there is a lot of gap and you want to lower the weld head, you will want to loosen the left side and tighten up on the right. Conversely, if there's a lot of drag on the film, you'll want to open up the gap, which would mean that you need to loosen up on the right and tighten on the left. So again, it's kind of a push-pull sort of thing, although there's no real pulling. There's a push and then a tighten. So we want to make sure that that wedge is properly positioned in there. And again, we want to look for a gap that is the thickness of a piece of 3 mil polyester. Now it can be as little as 2 mil, but for most of the purposes for the welding that we do, we're going to want to have the gap at 3 mil. So that's why we're going to set it to that. So again, it's just a matter of moving those set screws, but they both must be tight. Move the set screws either left or right as need be in order to get the proper gap. After the gap has been set, you'll want to connect the ultrasonic cable. Now this cable of course has a connector, and realize that there's this is kind of a bayonet mount. The pins will go into position, and then you must turn and lock this cable, lock this connector in the right position. And the same thing is true on the back side of the generator. The whole reason for this is the pin that's inside of here has to make positive contact with the component that's on the weld head or on the back of the generator. And it's very important that that be locked. So take the cable and position it on the back of the part, and again make sure that it's locked and that you cannot pull that off of there once it's finished. Now there's four pieces that are missing in this package. There are covers to not only to hide these bearings on either side, but also we want to keep the dust off of these as much as possible, because you have to realize that in this particular case, the weld head here has got to move up and down just a very small amount during the welding operation. So we want to keep those bearings as clean as possible, and again, that's where there's the covers. The bearing covers that should be in place, as you may recall, one of them was very poorly done by the anodizer. So I'm only going to return to you one of the covers. Fortunately, the one cover that is most critical is this one that has another small wedge on here. And the whole reason for this wedge is so that when you need to adjust the gap, you'll be putting a shim in between the wedges on the back side. So this little ramp here allows you to slide that in place, and there's a little magnet on the back side so that it will kind of stay in place as well. So this bearing cover will be attached over here on the in the appropriate location here. So when these covers get re-anodized, I'll send these to you, and then of course it's just a matter of putting the bolt in place and snugging up that bolt. But again, I will send those to you as soon as possible. So again, with the shim in place, or with that the wedge in place, then you can insert that shim in there, and that opens up the gap. And that shim is necessary for changing from one film to another, because, as explained in another portion of this video that I hope to send you, that 3 mil gap that we set at the tip of the horn here, that 3 mil is the ideal gap for welding 2 mil to 2 mil. So I realize this is a bit confusing, but we need to have the tip of the horn is going to rest in its basic setting, is going to rest at 3 mil or 3/1000ths of an inch above the film, or above the anvil. When the two sheets of polyester film are placed in there, of course the weld head will theoretically rest at, of course, only 3 mil, so there's 1 mil of variation there, and that provides us with some pressure. Now when we go to welding 3 mil to 3 mil, of course the film is a lot thicker, so we want to be able to bring the weld head up just a little bit, again to what we'll theorize as about 75% of the total thickness of the two films. So of course 2 pieces of 3 mil is going to be 6 mils. By taking the 1.5 shim and inserting it between the wedges, we've now opened up the gap by that 1.5 mil from the 3. Of course, 3 plus the 1.5 makes 4.5, and that 4.5 is approximately 75% of the total thickness of the 2 pieces of film that you're going to be welding. So with that, I think you're going to have everything that you need for a good welding operation, and I sincerely hope that when this is all put back together again, that you're going to have a machine that will operate for at least another 20 years or something like that. So good luck. If you have any questions, just give me a call, and I will do the very best that I can to resolve any questions over the phone. So good luck.